Namaste, everybody. I'm driving right now and I don't have a mask, so it's a little bit different. Today we're going to talk about how interconnected the world is. It's really quite interesting how we're moving away from this fear and separation that governed most of human existence into unity and love. And it's seen across the board everywhere. It started with human rights and women's rights in the mid half of the 20th century, to the right to vote, to international trade, and it's expanded to technology, media, things like the internet that literally brought everybody together. And my favorite topic or topics are science, religion, and psychology. And so many of these very different fields are beginning to cross paths, which is the most interesting part, evidence that we're entering the age of Aquarius, which of course is an age of a shared consciousness, of a altered state of a shift in global consciousness, in that we have the same consciousness, we become one, and the world is definitely going in this direction. So once again, in terms of science, religion, and psychology, it's really quite interesting. I was watching this thing about the default mode network, which is this thing they discovered, I guess psychologists discovered, in your brain, in the prefrontal cortex, that basically, if you ever think about yourself, your past, your present situation, or your future, you're using this network. So basically we use this network 24/7. This network is established by the age of 12. So kids under the age of 12, I guess under puberty, they behave a little irrationally because their default mode network hasn't been established yet. So from a spiritual perspective, that's the like the psychological science part of it. The spiritual similarity to the default mode network is in Eastern beliefs, when they talk about the ego. Yes, that's right. The ego resides in the default mode network. The ego tells you who we are. So if we ever think about self, this is a matter of the ego, or a matter of the default mode network. Psychedelics especially have a tremendous impact on the default mode network. Serotogenic psychedelics in particular, so drugs like LSD, psilocybin, DMT, mescaline, and 2CB, I believe, are drugs that exhibit no behavioral addiction, or sorry, they're not habit forming, and it's really hard to OD on it. I think no one's ever died from any of those drugs. I think in a lab they killed a rat from too much LSD, but really no one has died from ODing on any of that. But anyways, the interesting thing is how they play on this network. As you take large quantities of these drugs, people experience ego death, as they refer to it. An ego death basically turns off the default mode network, so it turns off your ego. And it's interesting, in Eastern mysticism, this can be accomplished actually through meditation and yoga. And what's interesting, when the default mode network gets turned off, is this cures actually a lot of psychological diseases. There is research done in how if you turn this network off, things like ADHD, things like depression, anxiety, panic attacks have reported to be cured by turning off this network. There's countless studies done now, like this huge rise in Eastern beliefs in like meditation and stuff as calm, finding your inner peace, and also in the ingestion of psychedelic drugs. As the war on drugs is coming to an end, people are opening psychedelic research again, and they're noticing how an addiction, and how this has a tremendous impact on addiction. How psychedelic substances can cure drug addiction. It's kind of odd. You're using a drug to cure a drug, but psychedelics aren't unlike any other drug. Like, I live in Vancouver, and the downtown east side is notorious for having hundreds of fentanyl overdoses per year. It's really quite sad what's happening there. And I've noticed that they opened up a center, actually, at Ibogaine Center in the downtown east side. And Ibogaine is it's a dissociative psychedelic, but you trip. You're basically on a psychedelic trip for 36 hours, and it's shown to have amazing results to cure heroin addiction, heroin withdrawal, primarily for the fact that you're tripping balls when you should be withdrawing from heroin. But so that's one aspect of it, but also this psychology, what happens on you in the trip, in the trip. You know, this ego dissolvation, this or in science they call it the deactivation of the default mode network. So if your default mode network becomes an addictive pattern, if you can turn it off, it's actually quite incredible. So it's quite incredible what happens in these psychedelic states, or these altered states of consciousness, not necessarily from ingestion. Psychedelics can be accomplished through meditation and yogic practices, though the psychedelics are a bit of a shortcut to this state. But in this state, you, from a spiritual standpoint, you basically connect to your spirit. You connect to your true self, which is something we talked about in a previous video. And it's really interesting what happens. You have this scanning, you dig into your subconscious, and things come up, things that you forgot about. I did an ayahuasca ceremony, and somebody started screaming that you're drunk, leave me alone. And later we learned that this guy was molested as a kid, and he made peace with that, and it's incredible. Stats are staggering how many people have cured their addictions through these altered states of consciousness, which could be accomplished through the ingestion of psychedelic drugs or through meditation and prayer. So once again, like the connectivity, like it sounds like I'm rambling, talking about many different things, but all these different things are one. They're all the same thing. And as we enter this age of Aquarius, we learn that all these different categories become so interconnected that really they're not. There's no science. It's not psychology. It's not religion. It's not the internet. It's all just one thing. And it's really interesting. I'm just noticing that these supposedly separations that we made are not real. Everything's just one. The world, the illusion of the world is that everything is separate, that I am a separate entity from this person, but in truth, we're one. And if we can change our thinking into that, we will advance greatly as a human race. We'll no longer see him as a competition or an enemy, but as a friend, or not even as a friend, but as myself. So one thing in the age of Aquarius they keep talking about is in the age of Pisces, it was do unto others as be done to ourselves. In this age, it takes one step further. It's not that do unto others as I want to be done to myself, as the other person is myself. We are the same consciousness. Once again, this is Masked Reality, not so masked this time. Satnam.